Hello and welcome to the Mail and Guardian podcast in partnership with the National Lotteries Commission, where we unpack all things a Fraud Awareness Week as we are observing it with the NLC. And today's episode, we're looking at how the fraud prevention plan and anti-bribery management works at the NLC. I am Kia Ncube, and with me today, I have Molemo Mogolane, who is the NLC Chief Risk Officer. Good afternoon and thank you so much for joining us.
Good afternoon and thank you for having me. Delighted to be here.
So let's start off by unpacking your division and what its role within the NLC is.
So my division is called Enterprise Risk Management within the National Lotteries Commission, and our mandate is it's risk management.
Okay.
Talking about establishing risk management frameworks within the organization, conducting strategic risk assessments, operational risk assessments, projects risk assessments, and so forth. But then over and above that, the function is also responsible for ethics management within the organization, which to the greater level talks about infusing or embedding the ethical culture through various initiatives that I think we're going to touch on later on.
Yes.
We're also responsible for business continuity. There is a program that we put in place so that, if the organization experiences some shocks, like unforeseen disasters or business interruption, we need to invoke business continuity plan. And I am also responsible for what we call non-compliant grantee management program of the NLC. This is where the people that we avail the funds to do not comply with the grant agreements, do not spend money according to the agreement and so forth. So my division, through the non-compliant grantee committee, actually deal with those cases and then make sure that, there's corrective action.
Okay, so would you say you are kind of like the police?
I'm not the police. In fact, that's what I wanted to say to you, because when you talk about ethics management, people think that ethics management is audit, ethics management is witch hunt, ethics management is about catching people. Ethics management is strictly around correcting the perception and embedding the culture to support the values of the organization.
Okay,
Thank you
completely
so much.
understand that. So you are the support of integrity, credibility, transparency in terms of ethics.
Through risk management.
Through risk management.
Thank you so much.
So let's talk about understanding the fraud prevention plan within the NLC. So what is the purpose of the fraud prevention plan and how does it fit into the NLC's governance framework?
All right. So being a public entity, the NLC also subscribes to the provisions of the Public Finance Management Act and its National Treasury regulations. So the Act requires the NLC to have and implement effective systems of risk management. But over and above that, it says that it must develop a fraud prevention plan, which must also guide the efforts of internal audit. And that is also integrated into the enterprise risk management strategy, right? So when we do that, we take those legal requirements into consideration, but then that's the bare minimum. So you are doing what you want to do, but then you're not really implementing a rigorous approach that will yield the results in making sure that you actually keep corruption within an organization. Therefore, you'll go a step further by adopting some of the best practices like your ISO 31000, which actually enables you to have a structured and more dynamic and integrated approach into the way that you identify and manage risks. And then once you have done that, you conduct what we call a fraud risk assessment. Now, from the fraud risk assessment, you are able to identify and establish the exposure from the risk management perspective. So you'll have your fraud risk universe, which will tell you that from grant management, this is how you are exposed. From ICT, this is how you, from supply chain, from finance, what is the level of risk or the controls effectiveness. Then from there, you are able to develop a fraud prevention plan. But having a fraud prevention plan that is based only on the PFMA and ISO 31000 is not enough. When you adopt or you stitch it in the fabric of ISO 37001, which is anti-bribery management system, now you are bringing other dynamics which actually put you in a place to implement what others will call best practices. And that is when you are likely to reap the benefits of a fraud prevention plan.
So in my head, as you're saying all of these things, I'm seeing a checklist for a checklist for a checklist. But something that you also just mentioned is practice, right?
Yes,
so
yes,
you
yes.
have what you've just you have what you've just pointed out. So how does the fraud prevention plan now look like in action?
Okay. So fraud prevention plan is mainly addressing the 4 pillars.
Okay.
Prevention. But we know that people are very creative. So when you put the process in place or system in place, they don't work against the system, they work around the system. So there's a chances that you might not be able to prevent.
Okay.
So the next pillar is what? Detection. So how you detect, firstly, obviously, in your prevention, you'll put processes in place. From HR, you'll put your recruitment processes to make sure that the issues of nepotism, you manage them. From supply chain, you put processes in place to make sure that, supply chain fraud and corruption is curbed. From the grant management, which is the NLC environment, again, you'll put processes in place to make sure that you have your adjudication systems, you have your APIs that actually checks and then also validate the authenticity and the validity of the documents when they're submitted to make sure that we do not deal with hijacked or fraudulent organizations, right? And then you also do your awareness. You also have your due diligence mechanisms in other areas. You also do training. So that's how you prevent.
Okay.
So if you can't prevent now because people are creative, then you need to detect. How do you detect? You detect it through inspections, number one. You detect it through management supervision. You detect it also through the whistleblowing hotline where people report unethical behavior.
Yes.
And there are other areas in which you can detect. But once you detect, you don't go and discipline people or report them to the SAPS and all of those things.
What's the proof?
Yes, that calls for what? Investigation, which is the 3rd pillar.
Okay.
And once the investigation is being conducted now, the allegations have proven to be true. What do? There's resolutions. Resolutions come in a sense of, one, if it's an internal employee, then it's disciplinary action. If it's a grantee, then there's the process that I'm talking about, non-compliant grantee management process, because there's consequence management for that. And then also we are required by the PFMA to report cases to the SAPS and the law enforcement agencies. But then how we get it wrong, most organizations, is that we only implemented those 3 resolutions. But there is a 4th one, which is quite important, which is improve your internal controls. So when you go back and check what went wrong in these controls that I have, you are able to do your root cause analysis and develop mechanisms to make sure that these issues do not reoccur. So the success of the fraud prevention plan in all organizations, including the NLC, depends on the proximity and the integration of these 4 pillars. Prevent it, detect it, investigate it, and respond to it.
And respond.
Yes.
Okay. Prevention, right?
Yes.
Because prevention is better than cure.
Cure.
We all know that. So what systems or controls support fraud and bribery prevention within the NLC as well?
So when we talk about prevention, I'm actually glad that you asked that, because if we do not prevent it, when we say it's better than cure, it's because if we do not prevent, we're likely to spend more funds in responding to this, putting more efforts that could be directed somewhere where there is constructive. For an example, you'll spend more money in investigations, and investigations are very expensive.
And
some of the cases, they don't end only in the internal disciplinary actions. They also go to the labor court, they go to the courts and so forth. So all that money that is spent there, had we prevented it, wouldn't be incurring all these costs, and our focus will not be separated. Will still be focused on service delivery.
Okay.
So preventative measures that we have in place, I think from ours basically is the use of ICT. That's number one. And I'm glad that the organization took a deliberate approach to implement what we call Tutuka system. Okay. We used to call it modernization because it was a modernization project, but then hey, it's our it's our project. It's here. It's home. Baby. Then we ran a competition internally and said the employees, here's a competition. Give us a name that will appeal. Then there was an adjudication, and then the system was named. But then that system has several modules, and what I like about the first one is that it has the APIs, which is the application programming interfaces, which means that our system is connected to Home Affairs, our system is connected to SARS, our system is connected to CIPC, our system is connected to DSD. what that helps with is to make sure that each and every application that we receive is in good standing with all these other organizations. And then the documents that have been submitted are also accurate and they are authentic, right? So the issue of fraudulent applications are actually prevented, right?
Okay.
So that's number one. Number two, basically, it's more of making sure that we speak a common risk language within the organization.
Across the board.
Across the board. And then one of the biggest tools that we use in preventative controls is the issue around the ethics perception survey. Because through ethics perception survey, you get a temperature or a climate of ethics within the organization, because this is where the stakeholders say, this is how we perceive you, right? You will ask them about awareness. Then you can establish which areas you must create awareness on in the organization, so that everybody knows what they're supposed to do. That's prevention. You will also ask about ethical conduct, which in case we'll talk about. Do you think that grant abuse or funds abuse it's a problem within the organization? They will tell you that. Procurement irregularities, nepotism, favoritism, unfair treatment, and all of those things, and then you get perception. And then from there you are able to revisit your policies, like your ACM policies, retaliation policies, discrimination policies, to make sure that you cater for the issues that have been raised. And then once that is put in place, basically, and then you embed them, and then you just don't develop policies and put them in the system, but you actually socialize them and make sure that people understand them. And then that also creates a beautiful culture that actually puts or makes sure that the organization are actually pulling to where the organization wants to go. You don't have the employees that are going that direction, but the direction of the organization is that way.
Yeah. So it's also sounding like these preventative measures are also making sure that you're also proactive. Is that, am I hearing correctly as well in that sense?
Yeah, of course. Because if you can look at the fraud prevention plan, the first part, that's where we spend most of our focus and resources, because we want to be more, we want to be proactive.
Yeah.
But then when you go to the issues of having to do inspections and whistleblowing, now you are being reactive. But then if we do that first part correct, the other parts will flow nicely.
Fall into place.
Yeah.
And culture and accountability. How's the NLC truly fostering a culture of that supports fraud prevention and integrity as a whole? Because obviously integrity is doing the right thing even when no one is watching.
It's funny that you should ask that one, because I was talking to the chairperson the other day, in fact, and he asked me, said, Molemo, I see the report that you just presented, but I'm somehow perplexed, because I do not, for an example, in a lack of a better way, understand what is the climate ethics of the organization. And that's why I need to come in to answer this question the way that I'm going to answer to you. How do we do that? Ne? Number one, there needs to be a tone from the top.
Okay.
Right?
Because it does start at the top.
And then a tone from the top, it does not only mean the words that are actually spoken by management or even the board, because those are just vocals. And then they will work well if we're in the business of making music. Then we can use the vocals. But here, action speaks louder than words. So how management and the board conduct themselves, and also the tone from the top in terms of the statements that have been issued by management, walking the talk. Over and above that, we're looking at what resources do we put in the organization to actually advance the agenda of ethics within the organization. So that's resource allocation, right? Number three, again, it's about the efforts that have been put in terms of oversight. I'm very, very fortunate to be in an organization right now whereby the board pays attention to details. In most organizations, risk management, when you go to the board meetings, is the last agenda item. And by the time you get to it, they say, CRO, we left you only 5 minutes. Can you just go through it, take the document that's read, just highlight the silent features, and then that's it. But then in the NLC, the risk management report is the first report that is get dealt with. Because they do understand that, the internal audit conducts what they call risk-based audits. That means that their audit plan should be risk-based. So if you don't get the risk management right, your internal audit is likely to be flawed, right? So that's what I'm talking about, the tone from the top. The organization oversight, the resource allocation, walking the talk, and so forth. Over and above that, we need to make sure that we do this continuous awareness sessions. Up until now, I did not know that there is something called ethical values. I thought values are ethical, are good.
Period.
I
won't lie, me too.
I thought ethics, and then now I got to a situation whereby I say we need to promote ethical values. I'm saying, but why don't we just promote values? Then I've learned that because I painted this scenario to say that, okay, here's a value, because a value is something that you behold, something that you will prioritize.
Yes.
And that's what the organization say, this is our values. So if as a person you have a value that says family comes first or family over everything, and you sit there in the panel and you have strong influence as to who gets appointed, and one of your family members is one of the candidates for the position, and your value is family comes first.
Yes.
And then with the influence that you have, what are the chances that the position can be awarded to any other person than your family person, because family comes first? So alignment of personal values and organizational values. That's why other organizations, they will take you to assessments to establish whether are you a value fit candidate for the organization, so that you are aligned. You don't cause frustration within the organization. But I think that awareness is quite critical, because people need to know what is right and wrong. And then when it comes to ethics, remember, it's personal convictions. What is unethical might not be illegal, for example. So those dynamics needs to be put into place, and then people should be orientated on them so that they know how to respond and what to accept and what not to accept.
How does the NLC truly ensure that fraud prevention plan and the anti-bribery teamwork remain effective? Because effectiveness is what we want, right?
Right. So at the highest level, it's all about the oversight and monitoring. So everybody needs to know what's their role, and they should perform those roles. The board understands that their role is to provide an oversight over the implementation of the fraud prevention plan and the anti-bribery management system. EXCO understands that their role is to implement various aspects of the fraud prevention plan, right? Employees knows that their role is to make sure that they implement controls in their areas of operations, but over and above that, they adhere to the policies and principles of the organization, right? At my level now, it's an issue around the combined assurance. Then it's a good thing that we established a combined assurance forum within the organization, of which I'm a chairperson too. Vincent, our chief audit executive, is a deputy chairperson too. So what we're doing there is to look at the issues of 5 lines of defense, because now you're talking about collaboration. How do we ensure that everybody's doing what they're supposed to do? So our combined assurance model has 5 lines. In practice, they only deal with 3 lines, but then we tailored ours to 5, right? The first one is management implementing controls. The second one is risk management, providing oversight over the implementation of those controls. Compliance management, which is the function in our legal department. They also provide the assistance. And then there is also the EXCO subcommittees, like your health and safety, your loss control committees, bid adjudications, and so forth. Those are sitting at the second line of defense. All of these things are done in the name of the ethics, basically, to make sure that we push an ethical culture, right? On the third line, there's our internal audit. That's Vincent conducting audits and giving assurance whether things are working or not, and giving recommendations. The fourth line of defense is any external assurer. Now we're talking about the Auditor General coming. We're talking about other assurers we are pushing now to get the ISO 37001 certification. We need to appoint a certification body. That certification body will come as the fourth line of defense, giving us independent assurance over the effectiveness of the ethics management program.
Okay.
Then lastly is the board and its committees. When you talk about HR risk, then the human resource committee of the board looks at that. When you talk about financial risk, finance committee of the board looks at that. When you talk about social and ethics risks, then the Social and Ethics Committee of the board looks into that. So that's how everything is pegged together in the fifth lines of defense of the combined assurance of the NLC.
It sounds like there's a lot of collaboration that's happening.
Yes. You can't do it alone. It's not a one-man show.
Yeah.
It's not a one-man show. I rely heavily. In fact, from the combined assurance environment, I rely heavily on our legal department and the internal audit. Typical example, when we deal with the issues of grantees that are not complying with the requirements of grants agreements or that have misused the funds. So when we sit in the committee, we look at these matters case by case. In other areas, you'll find out the grantee is non-compliant because they did not know better. And then case in point, it will be non-submission of the report. Because remember, one of the consequences when we list you as on the non-compliance listing, it means that you are prohibited from applying for funds up until you rectify whatever non-compliance it is. A period of 1 year must have passed from the day of listing as a cooling off period. And thirdly, you must pay back the money if there's an evidence that money was misused, right? But then for the committee or the function itself has been more developmental in a sense that we look at what is on the table. If it's administrative non-compliance, we can assist the grantees to comply instead of listing them and preventing them from applying, right? If it's the issues of gross negligence and fraud and money laundering, then I will refer that to forensic, whose forensic is internal audit. Hence, I'm saying I'm relying internal audit for them to investigate further. And that, the spin-off from there, it can be recovery of funds, which is the function that is sitting at legal to recover the monies. So there's the collaboration that we're actually talking about as a case in point. But there's so many examples that I can use, but that's how we operate.
Okay. So it's also Fraud Awareness Week.
Yeah.
Don't commit fraud. But what's your key message to staff and stakeholders concerning just overall fraud, as much as we are in Fraud Awareness Week, and just making sure that you move with integrity and transparency?
Yeah. So for me, it's doing what we're supposed to do, executing our responsibilities. That have been entrusted on us, right? Number one, if anybody's going to use the fraud hotline to blow a whistle, they must do it in good faith. They must not do that to settle scores or for malicious intents or to sabotage or to discredit people. Do that in good faith. Number two, we all know what we're supposed to do. Let us do that. Number three, let us all understand that the resources and monies and funds that are entrusted on us are actually for the development of the communities, not for our own enrichment. And let us continue to spread the message and do our little that we do in our corners. And then all these little things that we do in our corners, when brought together, they make a very huge impact.
Okay.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Molemo. We truly appreciate your time. With everything that you just said, I think my biggest lesson that I've taken from our conversation is the power of collaboration. And how important it is to make sure that things actually operate in the way that they need to operate. And as you're saying, the tone is set by the top.
Yes.
Phezulu.
It starts there.
It starts there. So thank you so much for your time and just for embedding that ethics, governance, and fraud prevention into every aspect of the NLC's operation. And of course, as we observe Fraud Awareness Week as well, that it reminds us that integrity is truly important and it starts with each and every single one of us.
Doing what is right, even though no one is
watching.
Yeah,
Say
well.
that to the camera. There's your camera.
Yeah, but thank you so much for having me.
Thank you.
It's been an absolute bliss.
Is the name. Molemo Mogolane is the Chief Risk Officer, and he was unpacking this very important subject of the fraud prevention plan and bribery management at the NLC. Do make sure that you keep yourself and others safe.